Hello and thanks for staying on LN 24/7. This is Politics Now. My name is Morno Bala Bugbo. Tonight we will do a lot of politics talking, this time around regarding the food situation, food availability, food affordability, and all of that, security for farmers and all of that. We'll be looking at Tinubu's tackling of Nigeria's food crisis. Here is a rundown of our talking points, which will focus on some of the latest, moves by the government to try to assuage the situation. First is the creation of the Ministry of Livestock Development, the suspension of duties, tariffs, and taxes for importation of certain food commodities, and food price regulation. Much ado about the proposed National Commodity Board. Joining us tonight on the show is Adesoji Adesina. He's a public affairs analyst, also a policy analyst, and an experienced journalist who has covered agricultural activities and government intervention scheme in the sector. He will be helping us better understand some of the efforts made by President Bola Tinubu and his economic team to assuage the food availability, affordability. I don't want to use the word crisis now, but for some people that's what it is. But of course, Soji is with me in the studio. Good to have you with us on the show today.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and glad to have you on set. Yeah. Okay, so let's break down some of the information that we have for you. Recall that on Tuesday, the Nigerian Senate urged the federal government to, as a matter of urgency, take measures to fight the current food crisis in Nigeria. The upper chamber also urged the executive to outline measures to combat the situation and address the people on steps taken. Let's listen to what the senator from Kogi West said.
All effort made by the current federal executive to arrest the consistent increase in food inflation have not yielded the desired result. There is need to be more pragmatic about addressing food insecurity, curbing other farmer crises, kidnapping for ransom and terrorism, and ensure the development of a viable national commodity board to regulate the prices of grains and ensure the elimination of artificial contribution to food and commodity inflation in Nigeria.
A bag of rice is selling at about 100,000. A bag of maize, the same thing. Even prices of tomatoes, onions, and other basic food is high. Distinguished colleagues, as representatives of the people, we need to do something, or at least say something. That's why I co-sponsored this motion, and I believe all of us here are concerned because we are talking to one another. Let's do something. The prayers of the motion is quite clear. If there need.
Well, also worried about the situation, the federal government on Monday announced the suspension of taxes on imported food items, a move Senator Ahmed Lawan believes should be thoroughly examined. Let's have a listen.
In today's national dailies, the executive arm of government is saying is considering reducing or removing taxes on imported foodstuff. Mr. President, here's the catch. This Senate must engage the executive immediately. What are the issues? Which taxes are they talking about? Because we should be seen to be doing the right thing. We have really little or nothing in our food reserve across the country. And nobody should come and tell us they will distribute foodstuff from our silos. The silos are empty, Mr. President. So it means we have to import food. And if we have to import, it means we need foreign exchange. And that is scarce. We have to engage with the administration. Government must be entirely responsible because we cannot take people for granted for too long. We have come almost to the end of their patience. And I think the elasticity is now going to snap if we are not careful. Thank you very much, Mr.
The other effort by the federal government is the provision of fertilizers to farmers across the country, something some senators said is yet to reach them and their constituents. Okay, so let's take a listen to that. Well, I call it accusation now.
Colleagues, it's unfortunate that the fertilizer distribution had to be delayed. But I have, at every point in time, briefed the Senate President on the current status of what has been happening. We had hitches from the NSA's office. They stopped every truck of fertilizer from moving out because of the security implication. They had to certify clear before they will allow the trucks to move out. And as of today, I just showed the Senate President, the trucks are being loaded. They will be moved to the various states. So I want us to exercise patience again.
Well, the president of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, expressed concern over the high rise of food insecurity in the country, adding that the federal government must find a solution to it. So let's have a listen.
So for me, I'm saying that this is an emergency. The food situation is an emergency. We must help our people. And part of it is also to make sure it's not just providing food today. It's being able to plant to make sure that latest October, November, we have excess food in the market. Because Nigerians must feed. Everybody is concerned. The primary role of government is to ensure the welfare and security of the citizens. And that is the reason why we are here. We must take emergency steps. The government is doing its best by ensuring that any food item that enters the country is zero levy in order to make sure that people have food. And then, of course, the distribution of these fertilizers across is to enhance production, at least within this period, because after this, they will be useless. So let us make sure that these things are there between now and next week so that we can distribute to our constituents, and we shouldn't keep them.
Aside from the various interventions, the Senate said government had implemented, of course, on Tuesday, President Bola Tinubu announced the establishment of the Ministry of Livestock Development. The president inaugurated the Renewed Hope Livestock Reform Implementation Committee at the Presidential Villa in Abuja, aimed at resolving persistent farmers-herders conflicts, which could in turn alleviate the food crisis plaguing the country. President Tinubu will chair the committee. Former chairman of INEC, Teher Jega, is the deputy chairman. And Tinubu said the federal government is fully prepared to cover the cost of acquiring the land to ensure the coexistence between herders and farmers, which has definitely gotten a lot of Nigerians worried about the cost. So let's have a look at the agenda for the Renewed Hope Livestock Reform Implementation Committee, which the government says will, one, work with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security to come up with lasting solutions to age-long crisis between farmers and herders, and also ensure the security and economic well-being of Nigerians. Let's take a listen to what the president said.
I hereby inaugurate the Renew Hope Livestock Reform Implementation Committee in Nigeria. It is now in your hands. We're ready to work for the success of this program and the first success of the entire nation. So we will leave a Nigerian flag without stain to our children. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Now, the minister for the new ministry is expected to be announced soon. So, Adesoji, good to have you on the show. Let's talk about this new ministry that the president, has announced. It's going to have a new ministry, a new minister, or rather. I mean, we've been talking about cutting cost of governance. So let's just talk about the politics of this, how it will work. The president said they would work out the financing of the ministry. Let's bear in mind that this is not even in the budget for 2024, but of course an intervention. So it backs the question. I mean, if you really wanted to solve this problem, you would have actually, looked into the cost implications and have it, imputed into the budget. But of course, there's going to be a supplementary budget. That one is another issue, allegations of 4 budgets running at a time. So the first question I want to ask you is the intentionality of government and the intentions for this ministry. Is it coming from a pure place to actually solve the problem of food crisis in the country? Because there are people saying that this is mainly purely political.
Okay, so fantastic question there. And then the first thing I'll say is, a thing that is very essential, such as food, being politicized is a tragedy. Simple as that. When you politicize food, even in war, you are not expected to politicize food. I mean, there are several UN conventions in regards to that. Let's use the Ukraine war, for instance. Even during the Ukraine war, we know there was some level of food shortages and all that, but there was an intervention to ensure that that was done away with, and then grains came out, even down to Africa, because Africa was affected. But then let's keep that aside, talking about, it being politicized. Now, one question I would ask is, there were several programs by the Ministry of Agriculture to, address one of the reasons why this ministry has been put together, right? Which is basically the crisis and all that. That's one of the core reasons why we have this new ministry being put together. What happened to the programs from the Ministry of Agriculture
that was supposed to cater to this challenge?
Issues. Now, it's a two-pronged challenge. One is food security. The other is the general security of lives and property addressed by the military and other paramilitary organizations. Now, taking an entire ministry involves several things. Have they taken cognizance of these things? Have they taken a look at these things? We just talked about jettisoning all those other programs. The military in itself has its own program to ensure that, of course, they won't tell us everything, but the military in itself has its own program to ensure that there is a level of understanding between the farmers and herders to quell some of these challenges, because of course it's not always about attacking violence with violence, or
it has to be dialogue.
It has to be dialogue. The military has its own program on that. So why jettison all of these? And while you are at it, we know that every time a matter involves the herders and farmers, we know that there are people who would feel always aggrieved. Take, for instance, the failed Ruga, failed Ruga program. We know how Nigerians frowned at it and all that. We know what Nigerians did. We know, even though there was some level of miscommunication, it was a very fantastic idea, but there was some level of miscommunication, some fears that were not allayed and all that and all that. Why just is all that? That you now go ahead and create an entire new ministry.
Now, just to be clear, the president said that they were going to work in hand with the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, but the question now is the immediate impact of what that ministry will do, because they're going to get office, they're going to hire staff, the right staff, they're going to put things together, then begin to liaise with people in the Ministry of Agriculture. Mind you, time is going, because we're looking at addressing the issue of food availability, food affordability at the moment. So the time that is going to take to fully set up, then, fulfill its mandate, don't you think that has filled, some of the opinions out there, most especially in the media, that this is likely political?
Now, again, going by the choice of who leads that ministry to minister, we know what it takes to make a minister. It's always about where is this person from, who is this individual. It's never been about what this person can offer. So that in itself is like shooting itself in its leg. Who is leading this ministry?
Because when you even take a look at the portfolio, not really the portfolio, but the personalities that are currently handling some ministerial positions.
You already have questions like ongoing. So now, we don't have a sneak peek to that. We don't know who is going to be what at the moment. But already with that perception in mind that, it is a political office. We're supposed to have technocrats as ministers, right? But we know we have politicians as ministers.
Now, you're seeing Atahiru Jega, being the deputy chairman of the committee.
Would that translate to him being the minister?
So this is someone who has worked, in electoral, departments like INEC and all of that. So what expertise is he bringing, to deputize, chairmanship with the president? These are questions that Nigerians are asking.
And of course, we already know the grounds with which this particular same individual had with the presidency on assumption of office from the beginning. All right, we know the whole, the way it was like more or less like this now seems like more or less settling
whatever dispute. No, this is a political program, so we can actually say
so it is
what
more
it
or
is
less,
or what it seems to be.
It is more or less, of course. We know Jega was one of the head honchos of PRP. To the run-up to the 2023 elections. We know how strong Jega is in the north with his voice, and he brought Buhari in, quote unquote. All right, the election he planned and brought brought in the likes of Muhammadu Buhari. We know the level of power, quote unquote, he wields in the north. And so, he even being there in the first place, what is his qualification?
So were you expecting that you would see maybe researchers, professors
like I said,
from the universities?
In such a very delicate...
Okay, but before we go ahead of ourselves, let's recall that this is supposed to tackle the farmer headers clash, which in some way could be political. So will demand a political intervention.
So are we
in
saying
some
that,
sort.
Are we saying that the farmer headers clashes has been political?
No, I'm just saying if you're going to resolve, there will need a form of diplomacy that will be necessary to. I'm just trying to look at where the government might be coming from. So it doesn't just seem as if we are just trying to negate the efforts of the government to actually resolve the problem. What are your thoughts?
I started by saying that there was a Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture had several programs to look into this matter.
But the matter is it's not getting any better, is it?
Because of the singular fact that we have politicized an issue, an of importance and essential issue, such as food, you do not politicize food.
So how has food been politicized?
The entire Ministry of Agriculture, this new Ministry of Agriculture, is about food, right? Production, food production. Am I correct? Now, when you begin to use political figures in place of technocrats who know better, then you're politicizing whatever is that. Like I was saying earlier while we were speaking earlier, I said if the process is flawed, the product cannot be good.
So let's move the conversation forward now. Let me ask you, do you think this will work? This ministry, will it achieve its purpose? Will it quell the agitations between farmers and herders?
What is the purpose of okay, so in your initial take while you were speaking, you were talking about ensuring that this ministry brings about reduce the level of food insecurity we're experiencing in the country at the moment, right? So what is the purpose of this ministry? It's not just to quell the conflicts of farmers herders, it's to ensure there is sufficient
food for everybody.
There is sufficient livestock production, which includes milk production, which includes the whole gamut of livestock production.
Okay. Now, we've talked so much on the politics sides of it, but let's just look at it critically. Now, it is going to be, the president said it will be, and it will be. So it has come to stay. So let's look at the potential. What do you think this can be for Nigeria? Because I recall listening to President Tinubu, and he was mentioning the fact that this is also obtainable in some African countries. Exactly. So, and I was listening to a report of the Herders Association saying livestock production is going to be really, really good for Nigeria's economy. So what are the potentials? What could this mean if whatever they do is properly executed?
Okay, so it's going to be phenomenal, yes, because of course, I just talked about milk production. That's one aspect we do not even we've taken it for granted for so long, and we do not even take cognizance of it. A young man in Adamawa, Adamawa, if I'm not mistaken, is doing fantastic well. Is doing so well with the production of milk. All right, in that aspect, but that's even just one. We know there are countries, I think Swaziland, if I'm not mistaken, is doing so well with livestock production. In fact, has the highest, produces cattle, beef, the most in the country, in the continent. Okay, there are African countries that are doing exceptionally well with livestock. For a fact, it's their mainstay. In Nigeria, if we could replicate that, it would be fantastic.
So why have we not been able to replicate?
Exactly. But then, have we looked at the number of, have we looked at the number of farmers who are dedicated to livestock production? Do we even have like a census of farmers who are into livestock productions? And when we are talking about livestock, we're not just talking about cattle. We're not just talking about sheep. Several other things.
But when you talk about the census of these farmers, I would want to believe that those who are into agriculture in generally will have like association of cattle and all of that.
Poultry,
yes.
PF, is it PFN? Is it PFN now? PFN, I'm not sure. Poultry Farmers Association of Nigeria, they do, but then at the same time, because of politics and all that, we know that some of these groups are being highly politicized, and so they have conflicting interest even within their party, or even within their
themselves.
associations. Yes, and also to even add to that, these groups, how well taken care of are they by the government? Just last year.
So this could be a gap that government can address.
Needs to fix before they go into all the other things like setting up the ministry. It's like building a house of cards. If you haven't set your foundations properly, several things just look wrong. Permit me to use that word.
So in other words, you are saying that the government did not do a feasibility studies on how this would work. It's just more on the political side of things.
Time. Sorry to say, but that wouldn't be the first time the government is doing just that. We just had a fiasco with the road. What they call it again? Just keep my mind. The road in Lagos.
Lagos Calabar Coastal
Road. We just had a fiasco with that.
There was no feasibility studies, no EIA report.
So it wouldn't be the first time, like I said. But then, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If the right things are done, if the things are done properly, if the process is followed through properly, all right, we could have a product that we all would be proud of. That is in the process is followed properly. The right things are done. Okay? So, we're still looking at what positive effect would this bring to the table. If followed through properly, we could have an increase in meat production. Across all boards, poultry,
chicken,
whatever it is, we could have an increase in it. Of course, and the farmers could be happy. Would be happy.
Now, we were listening to the president talk about removing import duties from some commodities that he mentions. Now, you talked about having enough meat to go around in the country. We have the importation of turkey and some other birds from outside the country. Now, if you're going to make livestock work, are you not going to ban, or should you not ban, rather, the importation of foreign meat into the country?
Well, but that wasn't in that flesh or meat, so to speak, wasn't.
Which is just one aspect.
It's not even in that. It's
the
not,
agenda.
It's not
for the livestock ministry.
Aside even that, it's not even amongst the list of things that, of course, the taxes would be. There will be.
I know. Just I think 4 of them. I think maize. We have the graphics.
It's not in any of those. So, but regardless, one thing we have learned with shutting our borders during the previous administration is that it needs to be done systematically. Now, it's been tried on a smaller scale in different states of federation, particularly Poultry Farmers Association tried that. All right, at least I was part of that. States like Plateau State banned every poultry product coming into the state. They needed to boost the production from within the state. We tried that with Kogi. We tried to ensure Kogi State does the same, but of course, politics and all that couldn't. But then, on a grand scale, Nigeria, at some point, it was banned. So most of the chicken that you see being imported were done illegally. At some point, but then you cannot do that without enhancing or giving a chance for those within this country or within the state to thrive. At some point, a bag of feed in Nigeria was going for close to 30,000 naira or even more. So how do you expect the poultry farmers to, have profit?
I don't know if you were listening to the senators when we played the clip, and I think some of them were talking about the fact that the fertilizers government said they were going to share to farmers, that some of them have not been able to get them in their constituents. Now that's another key problem, because most of the time government has very, very good ideas, but the challenge now is how does it get down to the root level? Because the people at the grassroots level are actually the ones who are farming, at least on the subsistence level, which can also contribute, because you see some of these market women, I mean, that's their livelihood, that's what they do for a living aside mechanized farming. So how do you think having this livestock, Ministry of Livestock Development now, work hand in hand with producers at the grassroots level and others, those who are involved, in livestock farming in general? And since we're even talking about tackling food crisis in the nation, cutting across every level, of agricultural production in the country.
Okay, so agriculture in the country is still on the subsistence level, basically. And it is the rural people that do this. And you're very correct that, having a level of interface between the ministry and the people would, if it's done properly, of course, it would yield a lot of good for the country. However, when this is not done, again, we'd have to go back to the process. When we have people who do not have a complete know-how at the helm of affairs, then definitely it would have a backlash. When you have someone that doesn't have a full grasp of what it takes for a poultry farmer, for a cattle farmer, to have a ranch, when he or she doesn't have a full picture, how then do you expect success in the ministry? So please, in as much as, yes, we're yet to know who the minister would be, we're yet to know who the key directors, who the key people would be in this ministry, we're yet to know them. It would be of great service to put at the back of the mind of those that will fix them there, to know that technocrats and people who know the ropes for this very new ministry, all right, will be it. If they don't get those people, then it's DOA, is dead on the line.
Now, let's talk about the security aspect that this ministry can actually help to tackle, which has to do with, of course, this scares the farmers from even going into full-time production. Like you look at the Northeast, that's been plagued with a lot of, insecurity crisis and challenges and all that. So how do farmers, have the joy to say, okay, we want to farm, when you're scared that perhaps one day, I could lose everything? So that really deters people. So there's, if this actually goes into full scale operation, just like you said, it can act, there's potential here, but the question is the will, the political will. Does the government have the political will to do that in this aspect of insecurity in some of the states, that are hotspots for targets of terrorism, and this has discouraged farmers from actually going into full time production? How do you think this ministry can come in to solve that problem?
Like I said earlier, the military had its own programs. It was running to ensure that, and of course there are several NGOs to even ensure that some of these things happen, a level of interface between the farmers and herders and all that. I think if the security issue is handled in these areas, okay, let's not even go so far. The one happening in the Northeast basically had been, of course, an issue of terrorism and banditry and all that. Crop farming had been hampered, had been hindered because, of course, I I wouldn't want to go into that, the issue of the politics of whether, those areas are truly safe or not. You understand?
So are you saying those places are not safe in the first place?
Are
we being deceived?
Well,
No.
I don't. How?
Excuse me.
Few
Yeah.
weeks back, I hope we all aware that just a few weeks back, Boko Haram said they've resumed and of course resumed and their activities in the northeast, and there were explosions and all that. Just a few weeks back. The place would have gotten so much rice from, which is in Niger State, still has enclaves that we are not sure of yet.
Whether they are safe, is that what you're saying?
Yes, whether they are safe. Whether they are safe, we're not sure. We're not sure. We can't say that for 100%. All right, the issue of banditry and all that is still an issue. We're not talking about terrorism, pure terrorism by groups.
We still fall under the enclave of insecurity.
Insecurity.
So now we know that the military,
Sorry,
like you said, okay,
we know that there are still places that are still people that are still being taxed before they go to the farm in the northeast. But coming back to the whole issue of the Ministry of Livestock. Hey, for God's sake, one of the mainstay of Boko Haram at some point was fish in Baga. Right? Now, if the military, I'm not even talking about the ministry now, if the military can ensure that livestock in that area goes well, we're not even looking at, let's say, sheep, goats, cattle, we're not even talking about that yet. If they can ensure that a thing as common as fish can be taken off the hands of Boko Haram and all these other bandits and all that, then I think we would have a headway. But would that happen? Would that happen? Can the ministry do what the military has been doing? I don't know. I don't have answers to these are just questions.
well, we'll see what it will turn out to be. But let's just look at some other issues. You talk about the also move by the government to ensure that essential food items imported through land and sea and borders. The Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kyari, recently made it known that the listed food items, which include commodities that are under the federal government's 150-day duty-free import window, are maize, wheat, husked brown rice, and cowpeas. This, brought a lot of, commendation to the government as because of this particular initiative. Now, how will this help, to, reduce? It's just 150 days. Is the number of days too short, so to speak?
Now, so let's clear the air on this. Is it the window interval that is 180 days, or it would take 180 days for this to take effect? Now, this is one thing that we need to be very clear on. If it's going to take 180 days now, 150 days for this to kick in, for this whole duty-free jamboree to kick in, it then leaves us the question: what happens to the common Nigerian? Let's not forget, on resumption of this administration, the president said he was going to look into food insecurity. It's over 100 days already.
A year.
A year.
We just celebrated 1 year under his leadership.
A year.
No more 100 days now. So we are free to fully access the administration.
Some of us are actually already critiquing that. It's 100 days already, and
it's too early.
No. At that point, it was now like you said a whole lot. At that point, we're grappling with food. We're grappling with fuel, but let's leave that aside. It's a year already. After a year is when you're promising 4 months or 5 months buffer, no, did I say buffer? A 5 months period before the slightest measure to ensure there is an end to food insecurity kicks in. I feel it's too long a time. Hey, it can be done immediately. It's not a fiat. I understand that. It can't be a fiat. But it can be expedited. And we can ensure that it kicks in as soon as possible. And for how long a time? And there's a thing we need to also look at. Please, we need to really stop the politicization of food, whether livestock, whether crop.
So is this another form of politicizing food?
It will be if it is the cronies of the politicians that gets chance to be those that would import these things. Would it be open? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. How open will it be? Who are those that will get the licenses for this?
And when it comes in now, as beautiful as this suggestion, not suggestion now, as beautiful as this move of government is, you just raised something that brings to mind a very, very important question, and that will be, let's say these commodities, this maize, they come into the country. Now, another thing is the people who are selling it, are they going to, reduce price?
That's the point.
Because
the essence
that's
of
a very big problem.
The essence of it all is to ensure that we drive down the food prices.
Because if the government stops at that level, is it really going to translate to reduced price of those commodities?
It's simple economics. It's because there isn't the availability of these food, these food items, rice, maize,
brown rice, cowpeas.
Exactly. Yeah. It's because there isn't availability. There isn't enough. It's because there isn't enough. That is the reason why, of course, the price goes up. There isn't enough. And so if they import, they hope it will drive down the prices and people will be able to afford.
And what if it goes down and then people hoard? Because that is another thing. We've seen this play out with field distribution across the country, which is even resurfacing again. Now, you now talk about food at the same time. Now, this will lead us to the next talking point, which has to do with the issue of the commodity board, which earlier in February, Vice President Kashim Shettima had said it will, this is something that we propose that will come in to at least aid the regulation of food prices. But that is not on board at the moment. So if you take this initiative, how would you check and balance, saboteurs who are not going to ensure, because of greed, that this policy works for Nigerians? Saboteurs
would always be there. You can't stop them. But there is a bigger sabotage that is being carried out by other people in uniforms on the roads that we do not talk about. Do you know how much it takes for a truck driver to bring in food from northeast to the south?
You're talking about a truck driver. What about even the average Nigerian that is just moving and driving his or herself from one place to another?
We're talking about this in commercial.
Yes, I get you.
So, do you know how much they pay? Let's start from the military, because the military is complicit in this. The police, hey, it's something that we know every day. Go to the road, hey, you know that is true. Okay, the military is complicit in this. Now let's take the Lokoja Abuja road. For every truck of grain that goes past with 1,000 naira at every checkpoint.
This is something you found out.
This is something that several investigative journalists have done so much work on, which I can boldly speak on the one done by what's his name now? In Banga in Sine. All right, he's done so much work on this and has published it. It's there in public domain. All right, they part with that amount of money. How much are they paid? How much would they buy that fuel with? The fuel price is another thing that we are not even talking about.
So, in other words, if the government wants to holistically handle the issue of food crisis, I mean, I'm looking at some of these loopholes that you are mentioning now that may not be obvious to the government, but these also contribute, to affect the price of the goods, which makes it not affordable for Nigerians.
Exactly. Now, the first thing they would, of course, there is the issue of, a personal sabotage that Nigerians do. Again, just hike up the price, of course, which Nigerians have been talking about, price regulation and all that. They just hike up the price because of this, because of that. For a fact, we know that. This affects every aspect of our living in Nigeria. Wages couldn't be, people couldn't really stand by, wages being improved because we know that the market man and the market woman will, shoot up the prices of things and all that. These are realities that we know. These personal sabotages. But there is a thing of an organized sort of syndicate within the government coffers, which I just talked about, the uniformed men and women, being a part of this. You know that, okay, you have to part with something by the time you're on the road. If, prices are not even funny anymore, and then, we add all of that to the cost. By the time it gets to the market, the common man cannot afford it. You understand? That one is something that we need to really look at. But then we also need to orientate ourselves as people. As Nigerians, we need to tell ourselves the truth. The average Nigerian is always on the point of looking on how to, cheat his neighbor. We need to really also look at that. So the National Orientation Agency has a job cut out for it also, to also educate Nigerians on the ills of all of these. But then, let's look at what the government is doing.
Now, talking about what the government is doing, because from the way you're talking now, it wouldn't just take one initiative to get things in order and to ensure that we exit this phase, where food is not readily available to the average Nigerian. Because I would recall, Pastor Chris, he said something. He said food crisis, it's artificial, because when you look at it in the real logical sense, there is no reason why, food should be scarce and food should not be readily available, most especially for a country like Nigeria. When you look at it critically, I mean, the rains are there, the land is there, so what else do you need? Even countries that don't even have the amount of rainfall that we witness on a yearly basis, seems to have the issue of food sorted out.
First and foremost, it's artificial because of the issue of insecurity. Simple. Look at all the places that have been hit hard by insecurity. These are food spots of Nigeria, food baskets of Nigeria. Benue State, for instance, Niger State, for instance, Jos Plateau State, for instance, Adamawa, Borno, Maiduguri, Adamawa, Borno, country of the Northeast, Yobe. These are food producing areas that have been known all through time to have been food producing areas. These are the places that have been affected by this crisis. It's not just about farmers herders. It's about stopping food production. So it's been calculated. Like I said, the military has a job cut out for it. The military honestly is doing well to some extent, but please, more needs to be done. More needs to be done. The Ministry of Agri, that, like I said earlier, had several intervention programs to ensure that there is a level of, food security and all that. The military has a whole lot more to do.
So if you wanted to like rate on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, how would you say security weighs into these crises? Does it take definitely? Would you say it takes 80%? So 80%. If we are able to sort out the issue of insecurity, 80%. Everything falls in line.
Everything falls,
excluding the market dynamics, which we just started looking into.
Adequate. The reason why we are importing this food duty free, making other countries richer at our own expense. Don't forget, it's our foreign reserves that will suffer for this. It's our foreign reserves that will suffer for this. Don't forget that. It's duty free. The reason we are doing all of this is because we are not producing enough.
Now, let's move away from the federal government. Let's come down to the states, because you mentioned Niger State and some other state that you mentioned now, which seems to be concentrated in the north. So when we talk about agriculture in Nigeria, crop production, livestock production in general, we look at the states in the west that are not, insecurity is not really as, concentrated like we see in the northeast and all of that. So do you think there's a conscious effort from the government to look into that region and see how they could consolidate, agricultural production in these cities, in these vast lands, in other states, apart from the north?
So the north has been blessed with land, arable land.
And so is the West too.
The West, yes, but when you look at what we produce, grains, what are we importing? 100% of what we're importing is basically grains. Where do we have a concentration of production of grains? The north. You can't compare the expanse of land in the north. It's just unfortunate that we even lump the middle belts to the north. Plateau State is not the north. Kogi State is not the north. Benue State is not the north. These are states that are central Nigeria. Niger State. Do you understand? So it's not, when we say the north, we just lump it all up, say, you understand the geographical locations I'm talking about. No. And when we go to the south, what are those crops that we produce in the south? We still have them. We have them. For instance, let's say cassava. Now, Ogun State is doing well in cassava. But have we even for once tapped into that? Cassava is one of Brazil's economic mainstay. It's their cash cow. Have we even looked into that? IITA is doing excellently well in the southwest of Nigeria.
So the challenge is...
Even doing, in essence, I'm just saying that regardless of what we produce, whether north, whether south, wherever, security plays an important role in the production of any of these products.
Now, this administration, like you said, has been doing a lot to assuage the situation. But most times, because I had the opportunity to speak with Bayo Onanuga, the president's information strategist, and he was faulting the media, that we're not really doing our job to checkmate the activities of government, because we seem to limit our focus and criticism and assessment just at the federal government level, and we're not looking at the role that the state governments, are really playing in this. Do you agree with what he
100%.
said regarding some of these issues, most especially food security?
100%. But then it also now, tells us the level of understanding we have with governance in this country. When we say governance, first fingers are pointed to the federal government. But we kind of
So
government
they are
are we running?
inexcusable.
Well, what kind of government are we running? No, not that they are inexcusable.
And that was funny enough. That was what I was actually trying to make him understand.
Not that they are
when you say state government, I mean they report to you. I was like, you people have NEC meetings
But we operate,
right here in Abuja.
What sort of government do we operate? It's a democracy. Aside that, a federal
government.
But is the federal government really federal? That's another. Do you understand? We see the moves that the anthem, the constitution, blah blah blah, all that. But is the federal government really federal? We should have federating states that should be independent and be able to handle their own resources. But have we had that? You can't say a father who should be in charge of his family and leaves the responsibility to the children and still he wants to leave the responsibility to the children, but then wants to bear the name of a father. The father should, if you are a father, you should take complete responsibility.
So in essence, the government still needs to, play a fatherly role.
Play a fatherly role.
To how the operations of the state government, functions to ensure that they are able to assuage some of these challenges.
Exactly. With the power given to it by the Constitution.
All right, Adesoji, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. It's been quite enlightening. I'm sure our viewers at home can attest to that. Well, our time is up. We've got to go, and definitely we are hopeful to see how this administration can, solve and continue to tackle the challenge of food crisis in Nigeria. Once again, Adesoji, thank you so much. We hope to have you on set. All right, so we've got to go. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Morno Bala. We will see you on another edition of Politics Now right here on LN 24/7.